Hi, I'm John. The autumn sun shone through the tall oak trees, casting soft shadows on our large family estate. Today, the place was filled with the chatter of relatives as we held our annual family reunion. The warm air smelled of roasting meat and fresh pie. My wife, Anna, who was very pregnant and glowing, stood beside me, smiling as we greeted cousins, uncles, and aunts arriving in large groups. "Honey, isn't it wonderful to have everyone here?" I asked. Anna squeezed my hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. "It is, but stay close. You know how your mom can be," she whispered. I noticed my mother, Helen, moving through the crowd, her eyes sharp and observant. As the day went on, the polite greetings turned into deeper conversations. Julia, my cheerful sister-in-law, joined Anna and me near the edge of the garden, offering some relief from my mother's watchful gaze. "So, John, that new case you're working on sounds tough, huh?" Julia asked, trying to shift the topic, which I appreciated. "Yeah, it's complicated, but it's nothing compared to handling family dynamics," I joked, though my eyes drifted toward where my mother was standing with my aunts, occasionally glancing at us. Anna noticed and tensed. "I wish she would just say what's on her mind. This silent judgment is exhausting," she muttered. "She just wants what's best for me, or at least that's what she thinks," I sighed. As the sun began to set, everyone gathered around a long table on the lawn for dinner. The air was filled with the sound of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and glasses raised in toasts. It was almost perfect, until my mother sat directly across from Anna and me. "John, I've noticed you've been busy with work lately. I hope you're still making time to ensure Anna is comfortable," Helen said, her voice sharp enough to make a few relatives stop eating for a moment. "Mom, Anna's doing great, right, dear?" I said, placing my hand on Anna's. "Yes, Helen, I'm fine and capable of looking after myself, but thank you for your concern," Anna replied, politely but firmly. Helen's lips thinned as she paused, her fork in the air. "Well, with the baby coming, you can't be too careful. I read an article the other day about how important it is for expectant mothers to avoid stress." "Really, Helen, I'm fine. John's been wonderful, and Julia has been a great help, too," Anna said, trying to shift the conversation. Julia quickly caught on and jumped in. "Absolutely, and wait till you see the nursery we've been working on. John, maybe you should show your mom the photos. It's coming together really nicely." And with that, the dinner continued. Helen's comments became sharper with each passing moment, subtly criticizing Anna's choices, from her diet to her decision to keep working late into her pregnancy. The tension at the table grew, and relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, I stood up, tapping my glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, "to family, by blood and by bond. May we always support and uplift each other, no matter what." Everyone raised their glasses in agreement, and for a brief moment, the mood lightened, but Helen's tight smile as she sipped her wine told me that the evening wasn't going to end peacefully. As the sky darkened, I had a feeling the real trouble was yet to come. Later in the evening, the warm atmosphere of the reunion started to fade, replaced by unease. The laughter and happy conversations that had filled the grand hall earlier were now replaced with a tense silence as we all moved toward the dining area for dessert. "Anna, wait till you try the lemon tart I brought. It's Julia's favorite," Aunt Margie said brightly, trying to lift the mood. "Oh, I'm sure it's wonderful. Julia's been talking about your baking all day," Anna replied, smiling as she linked arms with Julia. The two of them headed upstairs together, their dresses similar in style. But behind them, Helen's eyes narrowed as she mistook Julia for Anna. Her steps quickened, driven by a mix of resentment and a misguided sense of protectiveness. "I need to speak with you now, Anna," Helen called out, her voice sharp and urgent, but she was really calling out to Julia. Julia turned around, confused. "Helen, I think you," she started, but before she could finish, Helen, acting on impulse, pushed Julia. Thinking it was Anna, Julia lost her balance and fell down the stairs. The sound of her fall filled the hall, followed by horrified gasps as she hit the ground with a thud. "Julia!" Anna screamed, rushing down the stairs as the family stood in shock. Helen froze at the top of the staircase, her face pale as she realized the terrible mistake she had made. I pushed through the crowd, my instincts as a lawyer kicking in despite the personal horror unfolding in front of me. "Someone call an ambulance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. John's command cut through the chaos as he knelt beside Julia, assessing her injuries. "Why would you do this, Helen? She's your niece. Anna's voice trembled with a mix of rage and fear. Helen, flustered and stammering, waved her hands helplessly. I thought she was you. I just wanted to talk. By pushing her down the stairs? John's voice was cold, his eyes searching his mother's face for an explanation that made sense. Moments later, Julia was taken away on a stretcher, and the house fell into a heavy silence. John pulled Helen aside, his tone a mix of disbelief and authority. What's going on, Mom? Your behavior tonight wasn't just out of line, it was dangerous. What did you think Anna was going to do? It's all those articles and talk shows, Helen muttered, wringing her hands. They say some women trap men with pregnancies. I thought she was manipulating you. Manipulating me? Anna's my wife. We're expecting a baby together. How could you believe such nonsense about her? John's frustration mounted as he ran a hand through his hair, struggling to understand how the mother he once knew had become someone driven to hurt out of irrational fears. I got scared, and seeing her, or who I thought was her, brought it all up, Helen admitted, her voice breaking. John shook his head, trying to process her words. Anna needs me, and Julia deserves justice. We're going to sort this out, but right now, I can't even look at you. He turned back to Anna, who stood by the door, her eyes red and swollen from tears. John's resolve hardened as they both waited for news about Julia's condition. The night air felt heavy with everything left unsaid, and the trust that had once bonded the family now lay shattered. The joyful reunion had dissolved into a harsh, sobering reality. As they faced the consequences of a misunderstanding that almost took a life, the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed quietly. John paced the narrow corridor outside Julia's room, deep in thought. Inside, Anna sat beside her sister, holding her hand as the soft beeping of medical monitors filled the air. The weight of the night's events pressed heavily on John as he considered the next steps. When John returned from the security office, he held a USB drive in his hand, the small device feeling heavy with what it contained. I got the CCTV footage from the house, he said. It's clear, Helen saw Julia and pushed her, no hesitation. Anna's tired, red eyes filled with confusion and pain. Why would she do this, John? It doesn't make any sense, her voice cracked. It was deliberate, Anna, she thought she was pushing you. It's twisted, but it's right there, in black and white. Just then, the door opened, and Dr. Simmons walked in, his face serious. Julia is stable, but she has a concussion and a broken leg. It's going to be a long recovery. Thank you, doctor. Can we have a moment? John asked, his voice calm but firm. The doctor nodded and left the room. Once alone, John turned to Anna. I need to show you something. It's going to be hard to watch, but you need to see how far this went. They watched the footage on John's laptop. In the silent, grainy black and white video, they saw the terrible moment when Helen pushed Julia, sending her tumbling down the stairs. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Oh God, John, she really thought she was pushing me. John took a deep breath, his face serious. Anna, I've been thinking, we can't just let this go. Julia deserves justice, and we need to protect you and the baby. Anna looked at him, her voice trembling. What are you saying? I'm saying that my mother needs to face the consequences. I'm going to press charges. But she's your mother, John. Can we really go through with this? If we don't, what then? She nearly killed Julia. What if next time, it's you or our child? Anna slowly nodded, her own resolve strengthening. You're right, it's just hard. I know, John said softly, but it's necessary, for all of us. John stepped out of the room and made a few calls. He contacted the family attorney, explaining the situation and his intentions. The wheels were set in motion, and there was no turning back. Yes, I understand the consequences, but I can't let this go. She has to be held accountable, John said firmly, determination in his voice. Back in the hospital room, Anna's phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother-in-law, Michael, who had just heard about the incident. Is it true? What happened? Is Julia okay? Anna quickly responded, explaining what had happened and John's decision to press charges. Michael replied almost immediately, you have our full support. This is unimaginable, but necessary. John re-entered the room, gently squeezing Anna's shoulder. The lawyer's on board. We'll start the proceedings as soon as Julia is able to give her statement. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of legal discussions and tense family meetings. Relatives took sides, some couldn't believe Helen's actions, while others openly condemned her. John found himself increasingly isolated from many family members he had once been close to, his decision creating deep rifts that felt impossible to mend. One evening, as John and Anna sat quietly in the hospital cafeteria, Anna reached for his hand. "No matter what happens, we're in this together, right?" "Right, together," John replied, his voice steady and his grip firm. They returned to Julia's room, and John looked from his wife to his sister-in-law, his heart hardening for the battle ahead. The truth was unraveling, and with it, the image of a family that had once seemed unbreakable. In the courtroom, the air was tense, broken only by the shuffling of papers and occasional whispers. At the front, Helen sat rigidly beside her lawyer, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Across the room, John stood with Anna, preparing to witness his mother face justice. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "This court is now in session," his voice echoed through the chamber. The prosecutor rose, holding a stack of papers, her voice clear and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here to address a serious act of violence, one that could have ended in tragedy. We will show that Helen acted not out of confusion, but out of malice, endangering the life of her niece, Julia, whom she mistakenly believed to be her daughter-in-law, Anna." Helen's lawyer then stood, his tone measured and composed. "We acknowledge the gravity of the situation. However, we argue that this was a misunderstanding, fueled by concern, not an intent to harm." Helen's lawyer began. As the trial unfolded, witnesses recounted the events of that fateful night. When Anna took the stand, her voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "I never thought we'd be here, facing such a heartbreaking family rift. Julia was mistaken for me, and it was no accident, it was intentional." The key moment came when the CCTV footage was presented. The prosecutor played the video, and the courtroom watched in stunned silence as the stark, undeniable images showed Helen pushing Julia. Gasps filled the room at the clarity of Helen's actions. John, watching the footage, felt torn between his roles as a son and an attorney, each frame of the video landing like a personal blow. When John was called to testify, he spoke of his mother's growing resentment and paranoia. "It pains me deeply, but I must stand for what is just. My mother's actions were deliberate and dangerous," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Finally, Helen took the stand, her voice trembled as she spoke. "I thought I was protecting my son. I saw what I believed was a threat to his future, to our family's honor. I'm sorry, truly sorry, but it was a mistake." The jury didn't deliberate for long. The evidence was overwhelming. Soon, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, the jury finds the defendant, Helen, guilty of aggravated assault. The sentencing was swift, years of probation and a restraining order to protect Anna and her unborn child. The weight of the judge's words seemed to echo through the courtroom, a finality settling over everyone present. After the trial, as the crowds dispersed, John and Anna stood together outside. The tension of the past week seemed to lift, if only slightly. Anna looked up at John, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. "It's over, but how do we move on from this?" John took her hand, his voice calm yet resolute. "We rebuild, together. We focus on our future, on our family. We make sure our child knows love, not resentment." Their commitment to each other and their future child remained unshaken. And that concludes our story. What a journey it's been. Now, here's a question for all of you. If you were in John's position, would you press charges against a family member to uphold justice? Or would you find another way to resolve the situation to preserve family bonds? It's a tough choice between moral duty and family loyalty.
I'm an 18-year-old young man, and throughout my life, my parents held exceedingly high expectations for me. They saw me as a representation of their status in society and aimed for me to excel in every aspect. From my earliest years, I felt the weight of their demands as they pushed me to achieve straight A's, win awards, join clubs, engage in sports, and participate in various volunteer activities. My life seemed to be meticulously planned from the moment I entered kindergarten. They insisted that I pursue a course I despised at a prestigious university of their choosing. Their motivation wasn't driven by my future success or financial stability. Instead, it was all about showcasing me as their accomplishment. Throughout my 18 years under their roof, they displayed no interest in my passions, hobbies, or dreams. They never bothered to inquire about my opinions, feelings, or thoughts. Concepts like freedom, privacy, and respect were nothing more than distant dreams in my life. In summary, my parents exerted complete control over every facet of my existence. They imposed strict academic standards, leaving me with no semblance of a social life. They made me dedicate countless hours to studying, even on weekends and holidays. Tutors and coaches were constantly monitoring my progress and skill development. Any mistake or failure resulted in harsh punishments, including public shaming in front of relatives and the few friends I had. Upon graduating from high school, my parents compelled me to apply for the course and university they had predetermined. They framed it as my sole option, denying me any say in the matter. They stressed that following their plan and making them proud was my duty and obligation, threatening severe consequences if I couldn't gain admission easily. They openly stated that university admission held more significance to them than my well-being and life itself. My worth and gratitude were measured solely by my ability to secure admission there. Unfortunately, their chosen course didn't align with my passion for the arts, which they were entirely unaware of. When they discovered this, their anger and disappointment were palpable. They accused me of squandering their time, money, and efforts, and claimed that I had shattered their reputation, hopes, and dreams. They treated me as though I were a criminal, with my father labeling me a failure and a disgrace. The repercussions they had threatened soon became a reality. As soon as they learned of my failure to gain admission, they disowned me and banished me from their lives. They handed me the keys to an old, dilapidated van and instructed me to leave, expressing their desire never to see or hear from me again. In that moment, it became evident that my parents had severed all ties with me. I didn't attempt to explain, apologize, or plead my case. Instead, I simply climbed into the van and drove away. Uncertain of my destination and feeling a mix of hurt, anger, and betrayal, I also experienced an overwhelming sense of freedom and relief, finally liberated from the oppressive grip of my parents. I roamed the streets in search of a place to rest and sleep, eventually stumbling upon a campground where I encountered a group of individuals living in RVs and vans. They extended a warm and friendly welcome, inviting me to join their bonfire and barbecue gathering. As we shared our stories, I confided in them with the unvarnished truth about my situation. In return, they offered empathy and shared their own experiences of leaving behind homes, jobs, or relationships for various reasons. Each had a unique story to tell, some fleeing from something, others chasing dreams, and a few simply seeking new horizons. Nevertheless, they all shared a common theme. They were living life on their own terms. Their acceptance and sense of value provided me with a newfound sense of belonging. Over the course of the next month, we stuck together, enjoying adventures and exploring the local area. We hiked, fished, swam, and indulged in games, all while engaging in lively conversations, laughter, songs, and dances. Together, we relished in food, drinks, relaxation, and mutual support. We also pooled our resources to tackle practical challenges like vehicle repairs, resource hunting, making plans, and ensuring our safety. Moreover, this newfound community helped me recognize the toxicity of my parents' behavior and encouraged me to pursue my interests and passions. They wholeheartedly supported my quest to find my own path and goals, inspiring me with their tales of overcoming adversity to achieve success. That month spent with them was truly transformative. However, during this period, my parents made no effort to reach out to me. The sole family member I had contact with was my grandmother. But my parents had cautioned me not to reveal my homeless situation to her, leading me to fabricate stories about my well-being. My grandmother had always held a special place in my heart, being the only family member to treat me with kindness and respect. She showed me affection, gave me compliments, and stood up for me against my parents' harsh and unreasonable methods of raising me. She valiantly defended me from their cruel criticisms and unjust punishments, providing solace during my times of distress. Despite residing apart from us, she financially supported my parents when they faced financial difficulties, frequently sending me money and supplies. She would call me at least once a week, and her spacious home always had a room set aside for me. She had urged me on multiple occasions to move in with her and was well aware of my passions, offering unwavering encouragement and compliments for who I was. She never missed an opportunity to boost my confidence, acknowledging my intelligence, talents, and handsomeness. She recognized my potential and was willing to help me seize opportunities. Her love for me was unconditional, a stark contrast to my parents who would often deceive her about my health, and misappropriate her money. They eagerly awaited her inheritance, planning their retirement around the belief that they would receive a substantial sum of money and property from her. Before expelling me from their lives, my father had issued a stern warning, insisting that I mustn't divulge anything to my grandmother, knowing full well that she would stand by my side. I chose to withhold the truth from my grandmother because I didn't want to burden her with the knowledge that my parents had disowned me. I didn't disclose the fact that they had forced me out of their house, providing me with an old van and cutting off all contact with me. I kept up this deception not only due to my father's threats, but also because I wanted to shield her from worry, knowing that she was elderly and frail. When my grandmother would call, I continued to lie about my well-being out of love for her. However, I realized that I couldn't deceive her indefinitely. After a month of living outside in the van and making new friends, I decided to come clean and share the truth with her. I mustered the courage to call her and confess everything that had transpired. By the end of our conversation, tears were streaming down my face, and my grandmother, too, was weeping. She did her best to console me and expressed her anger toward my parents, labeling them as heartless, selfish, ignorant, foolish, abusive, and neglectful. She immediately invited me to her home and insisted that I stay with her. Upon seeing me, she embraced me tightly, determined to care for and protect me. She even apologized for my parents' actions, but I was hesitant to impose on her by staying in her home. She wouldn't hear of it and wouldn't let me leave. First, she contacted her lawyer and updated her will, naming me as the sole heir to all her property. She then called my father and informed him that she had learned about everything, reading her will aloud to him. She declared that everything she owned belonged to me and admonished them for their terrible mistake and shameful behavior. She made it clear that she would cut them off from her inheritance, which was a significant blow to my parents, given their financial struggles and their reliance on my grandmother's wealth and property to maintain their lavish lifestyle and social standing. They had always expected to inherit everything from her upon her passing and had taken her generosity for granted. Subsequently, my father reached out to me, followed by my mother. They apologized, expressed regret for their actions, professed their love for me, and claimed to miss me. They wanted me to return home and promised to change. However, I saw through their intentions, recognizing that they were only trying to manipulate the situation to regain access to my grandmother's assets. In response, I laughed at their pleas and hung up the calls. I questioned whether I was being unreasonable for not granting my parents another chance. Despite my desire to continue my journey, my grandmother was opposed to it. She inquired about my academic aspirations and what I wanted to do with my life. My grandmother was well aware of my passion for art, so she suggested that I enroll in a community college in her locality. Despite my parents bombarding my phone with texts of apology, I hadn't made up my mind about forgiving them. My grandmother, however, made it clear that even if I chose to forgive them, she could never do the same for the harm they had caused me. 2 days ago, my mother sent me a photo of my father, claiming he was severely ill but refusing to go to the hospital unless I visited him. Both my grandmother and I sensed deceit in her message, but we decided to investigate. My grandmother, accompanied by her lawyer, planned to drive to my parents' home. If things went awry, she intended to intervene and rescue me. Following our plan, my grandmother visited my parents' home yesterday. Once inside, my mother snatched my phone, and my father locked me in a room. I had instructed my grandmother to wait for my signal, but when she didn't hear from me, she bravely approached the house with her lawyer. Faced with no other choice, my parents had to open the door. My grandmother stepped in, saving me from their clutches. While leaving, my parents attempted to defend themselves, but my grandmother silenced them with her resolve. She intends to take legal action against them. I've decided to cut them out of my life completely. I'm fortunate to have a grandmother like her by my side. Many people dealing with toxic parents have no escape, but I am grateful to have her support. I will take care of her. She's a precious gem. Hey, everyone, I'm contemplating something regarding my cheating fiancé, and I'm seeking your input on whether I'm in the right. Let me share my story with you so you can weigh in. Creating a throwaway account for obvious reasons. I'm a 26-year-old male who decided to propose to my girlfriend of 4 years, a 24-year-old woman. I popped the question 6 months ago, believing that marriage was the natural next step after our healthy 5-year relationship. I was financially stable and confident in my ability to provide for us. However, my perception of our relationship crumbled when I proposed. My girlfriend is incredibly social and active on social media. As I was taking pictures of her with the engagement ring, I noticed notifications from a guy popping up on her phone. Curious, I discreetly checked the messages and discovered that she was cheating on me. Based on their conversation, it was evident that she had been to his place multiple times, and he was eagerly anticipating her next visit. Although I'm not one to invade someone's privacy, I felt compelled to dig deeper. Considering her lack of tech-savvy skills, it was easy for me to access her laptop. She consistently used the same password for most of her accounts. Once, I gained access to her laptop, and the revelations were shocking. I wasn't prepared for what I discovered. My ex had been frequenting a local sex club, which had led to her making a multitude of new friends who had seemingly been more intimately involved with her than I had ever been. At the time of my investigation, she was engaged in conversations with about 7 men. From their exchanges, it was painfully clear that she had spent intimate moments with them. In many of these chats, she demeaned my performance in bed compared to theirs, claiming they were far superior. Reading those words shattered my heart. The person I had loved for the past 5 years had been cheating on me for the better part of 3 years. The weight of this realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt an overwhelming hatred for her, an emotion I couldn't adequately describe. I never thought I was capable of such intense feelings of loathing towards someone I had loved so deeply. I couldn't believe I was entertaining thoughts of harm towards someone I still cared for. That's when I decided on a course of action. I wanted to inflict mental and emotional distress upon her. Perhaps this makes me a morally questionable person, but I was determined to make her suffer the consequences of her actions. I contemplated my decision, slept on it, and ultimately committed to the plan. I pretended that everything was normal between us. I knew about her infidelity, but I didn't let on that I was aware of her cheating. I put on a facade, acting as if everything was fine. We both lied to each other, and I observed her with a fake smile whenever I saw her enthusiastically chatting on her phone, all the while wondering if she was betraying me again. It was torment living with her, but I believed that my revenge would be worthwhile. The plan was straightforward. I had no intention of marrying her. I allowed her to meticulously plan the wedding, knowing full well that it would be a solo affair since I had no intention of showing up. I accompanied her on trips to select wedding details, like flowers and decorations, though I had no intention of paying for anything. I even suggested that I would match her honeymoon expenses with whatever she spent on the wedding. She was delighted, naively unaware that she was racking up a significant bill. Her innocence brought a cynical smile to my face, even in the face of this elaborate revenge plan. I understood that my actions were cruel, but in my mind, I believed she deserved it. I continued to monitor her affairs, and unsurprisingly, she was still engaging in infidelity. Knowing this made it easier for me to witness her financial downfall over a wedding she would be attending alone. With our wedding just 2 days away, I found myself experiencing a touch of stage fright. I couldn't help but question if I would be considered a bad person if I followed through with my plan. After all, she was still cheating on me. Just 30 minutes ago, I confirmed that she was going to meet one of her partners at a bachelorette party. I had discussed my dilemma with my best man, and he believed that my actions were cruel when I could have simply broken up with her. Hello, everyone. I want to express my gratitude for your support and checking in on me. I didn't anticipate that you would appreciate my idea as much as you did. Your support means a lot to me. Now, onto the update you've been waiting for. I decided to go with the suggestion a few of you provided in my direct messages, which was to expose her as the cheater she was. And so, that's precisely what I did. I asked my best man to play a video containing all the screenshots of the chats I had gathered over the months, along with those pictures. I included a brief explanatory message to ensure everyone understood that I would not be showing up for the wedding. I followed through with my revenge plan and told her that I would have an extended bachelor's party and return the night before the wedding. But we both knew I had no intention of returning. I didn't inform my family about this because my parents are close to her, and I didn't want her to find out. Only my best man was privy to my decision not to attend the wedding. As the wedding time approached, my phone was inundated with calls from both my parents and my cheating fiancé. She kept calling repeatedly until the calls abruptly stopped, presumably when the video was played in front of all the guests. Since then, I haven't received any calls from her, and my parents have tried to reach me once or twice, but I haven't answered. I'm reluctant to respond and be forced to explain why I kept my struggles hidden from them. I stayed in touch with my best man, who provided all the details about how the events unfolded. He described the humiliation she felt as the screenshots were displayed, revealing her sexting someone other than me. I had anticipated feeling a sense of satisfaction upon hearing the news, but the emotions I experienced far exceeded my expectations. Hello everyone, the past 2 days have been quite intense. I finally returned home, which used to be the apartment we shared. The first thing that struck me was the absence of her belongings. It turned out she had moved out during these past 2 days. She left numerous voicemails on my phone, pleading for me to reconnect with her. In some, she sounded angry that I had abruptly exited her life without offering any closure. Yet in the same messages, she would break down, begging for forgiveness for her betrayal. I recognized that her words were driven by her longing for the comfort of our relationship, but I couldn't bring myself to fall for her act again. I had devoted years to her, pouring my heart and soul into our relationship. What had I received in return? Heartbreak. I consider myself fortunate to have discovered her infidelity before marrying her, but it still pains me. I wish I hadn't found myself in this situation. In the following weeks, various events unfolded, and that's why I couldn't respond earlier. My ex decided she wanted me to cover all the expenses she had incurred for her wedding since she hadn't received any refunds and was displeased about it. She took me to court, and after weeks of not seeing each other, we finally faced each other. While I can't provide many details due to the ongoing court case, I didn't have to pay her a substantial amount. It was around 20% of what she had spent, and that was pretty much it. I had assumed that seeing her would evoke no emotions, but I was wrong. I felt terrible in her presence. I couldn't fathom how she thought it was acceptable to hurt me the way she did. I had wanted her by my side forever, while she decided that sleeping with others was a preferable choice. Now somehow I was painted as the villain for seeking retribution. I don't comprehend why she views my decision to distance myself and not forgive her as wrong. In my eyes, and in yours, I haven't committed a wrongdoing, and that's what truly matters to me. Honestly, this will be the final update I provide on this post. I have no desire to revisit the memories of this incident ever again. To the person offering advice, I appreciate your perspective, and you're right. I deserve better than what she has given me. As for exposing her secrets at the wedding, I've thought about it, but I've decided against it. I want to move past this chapter of my life. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's stories. Remember, if you have a story of your own that you'd like to share, please email it to the address provided in the description below. A 27-year-old woman, recently gave birth to the most adorable baby boy. My husband Mark, who is 29 years old, and I had been over the moon ever since we found out I was pregnant. As first-time parents, we were naturally a bit terrified. I must mention that my mother-in-law, whom I'll refer to as Brenda, had always been overbearing, but her meddling reached new heights after the baby arrived. Imagine my shock when Brenda announced that she had hired a full-time nanny for us. Initially, I felt relieved, thinking she might be trying to help. However, my relief quickly turned to confusion when I met the nanny, whom we'll call Stacy. Stacy was exceptionally young, perhaps around 22, and she had a penchant for meticulously tending to her appearance, even at the early hour of 7 a.m. Something about her made me uneasy, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As a few weeks went by, I couldn't help but notice that Stacy was exceptionally touchy with my husband. She often touched his arm while talking, laughed a bit too hard at his jokes, and it was clear that Mark was growing uncomfortable with her behavior. What made matters worse was that Brenda would frequently visit to see the baby, but ended up spending most of her time chatting with Stacy. One evening, I overheard Brenda and Stacy having a conversation in the kitchen. I couldn't make out the entire conversation, but I caught phrases like, "He'll come around," and "just be patient." My stomach churned, and I felt the need to figure out what was truly going on. A few days later, Mark was working from home, and I was supposed to take the baby to the doctor, but had forgotten something upstairs. When I went back up, I froze. There was Stacy attempting to kiss Mark in our bedroom, and Mark was pushing her away, looking horrified. I couldn't contain my emotions any longer. I screamed at her to get out while Mark stammered, trying to explain that he had no idea what was happening. Fuming, I called Brenda and demanded to know what was going on. Smugly, she told me that she had known Stacy for years and believed that Mark deserved someone more polished than me. She had hired Stacy with the intention of trying to seduce him away from our marriage. I was left speechless. I informed Brenda that she was no longer welcome in our home, fired Stacy on the spot, and warned her that if she ever came near our family again, I would involve the authorities. Mark was overwhelmed with guilt and swore that he had no prior knowledge of this scheme. I wanted to believe him, but I was deeply hurt and blindsided by the entire ordeal. We knew that we needed to have a serious conversation, but we were at a loss about where to begin. First and foremost, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for the immense support and advice you all have provided. It's been quite a roller coaster since my last update, and I felt it was important to keep you informed about our progress. After taking some time to cool off and carefully reflect on the situation, Mark was sincerely apologetic and agreed that we needed to seek couples counseling to navigate through these troubled waters. We were fortunate to find a skilled therapist who has been instrumental in helping us communicate effectively and rebuild the trust that had been damaged. Mark has been commendably transparent, granting me access to his phone and making a concerted effort to communicate openly about his feelings. As for Brenda, the fact remained that she is the grandmother of our son, but I wasn't emotionally prepared to face her just yet. Mark concurred that it was best to keep her at a distance for the time being. We collaborated on drafting an email to her, explaining the hurtfulness of her actions and their impact on our family. We made it clear that until she could respect our marriage and boundaries, she would not be welcome in our lives. Surprisingly, about a week after sending the email, we received a handwritten letter from Brenda. She profusely apologized for her actions and mentioned that she was actively seeking therapy to address her controlling behavior. She accepted the consequences of her actions, including the possibility of not being a part of her grandson's life. This unexpected turn of events left us genuinely surprised. Our therapist advised that if we were contemplating the idea of reintegrating Brenda into our lives, we should proceed cautiously and arrange a mediated meeting with her. We agreed to meet her at our therapist's office. Brenda appeared genuinely remorseful during this meeting and openly explained that her overprotectiveness of Mark stemmed from his father leaving them when he was young. She admitted to seeing parts of herself in Stacy and mistakenly believed that if Mark married someone like her, it would strengthen their marriage. She now recognized the flaws in her logic. Following the therapist's guidance, we decided on a gradual reintroduction with clearly defined boundaries. We would allow Brenda supervised visits with our son, provided that she continued with therapy and respected our marriage. In addressing the nanny situation, we acknowledged our need for assistance but wanted to ensure we were making the right choice for the right reasons. After careful consideration, we found a wonderful older lady through a reputable agency. She brings years of experience as a nanny, and her primary focus is genuinely on helping us care for our son. We understand that the road ahead is a day-by-day process, but Mark and I are committed to rebuilding and focusing on our family. I'm striving to release my anger towards Brenda while maintaining a cautious distance. Some of you might consider me too forgiving, but I believe that everyone deserves a chance to change if they genuinely show remorse and take steps to do so. Nevertheless, I remain vigilant and won't hesitate to sever ties if Brenda oversteps her boundaries again. So, this is where we stand at the moment. I'm still processing everything, but your support has been incredibly meaningful. Since my last update, significant developments have occurred, and I feel the need to share it all. Things seem to be on an upward trajectory. Brenda was actively participating in therapy, putting in genuine effort to change. Mark and I were in the process of rebuilding our trust, and our new nanny was working out wonderfully. However, one day, Mark received a message on social media from none other than Stacy, the former nanny. She insisted on an urgent meeting with both of us. We were hesitant, but something in her message piqued our curiosity. We agreed to meet her in a public place, with a friend accompanying us for moral support. Stacy appeared worn out, as if she hadn't slept in days. Tearfully, she confessed that Brenda had manipulated her. She revealed that Brenda had convinced her that Mark was in an unhappy marriage and needed someone better. Stacy genuinely believed she was helping him by attempting to get closer. But after being fired, she had a change of heart and wanted to make amends. We were both in a state of shock. Stacy showed us messages from Brenda that confirmed her story. When we returned home, it felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath us yet again. Brenda had been deceiving us all along. I was consumed by anger, and we decided to confront her. We arranged to meet Brenda at our house, where I presented all the evidence we had against her. Initially, she tried to deny it, but eventually, she relented and admitted to manipulating Stacy. She claimed that she had changed since then, which I found incredibly audacious. I informed Brenda that she was no longer welcome in our lives or in her grandson's life. I asked her to leave and never contact us again. Mark was heartbroken, feeling as if he had lost his mother. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Mark, but I knew that protecting our family was my foremost priority. Consequently, we decided to seek legal counsel regarding Brenda. Our attorney recommended a restraining order due to her manipulative behavior, and we pursued it successfully. In the midst of all this chaos, Mark and I grew closer, recognizing the necessity of unity to safeguard our family's well-being. We began attending a family support group designed for individuals grappling with manipulative family members, and it proved to be a valuable source of guidance. Our primary focus is now on cultivating a safe and loving environment for our son, free from negativity and manipulation. As for Stacy, while we didn't envision a friendship with her, we appreciated her coming forward. We suggested that she seek counseling to understand how she had allowed herself to be manipulated. I'm proud of the progress we've made, but it's disheartening that we had to go through such a challenging journey. My family remains my top priority, and I'll always protect them. Now, it's been almost a year since my last update, and I never thought I'd post again. However, something remarkable happened, and I feel compelled to share it with you. After Brenda was out of our lives, Mark and I shifted our focus towards rebuilding and strengthening our family. Our son is growing rapidly and continues to be the light of our lives. Our new nanny has become an integral part of our family. One evening, Mark and I received an invitation to a family therapy session from Brenda, conveyed through her therapist. Naturally, we were initially skeptical, but after discussing it with our counselor, we decided to attend, just to see if there was any genuine change. In the session, Brenda was almost unrecognizable. She had lost weight, her voice was softer, and she appeared humbled. Her therapist began by noting Brenda's significant progress, and Brenda herself spoke, explaining that she had been participating in individual and group therapy, as well as joining a support group for grandparents. She expressed understanding if we never wanted her in our lives, but felt the need to apologize and convey her gratitude. She thanked us for revealing the depth of her manipulation and control, and acknowledged that therapy had opened her eyes to the fact that she had been trying to live vicariously through Mark due to her regrets. She had never truly allowed him to live his own life. Brenda offered a heartfelt apology to me for all the pain she had caused, saying she was genuinely sorry. I found myself in tears. I had never expected to hear those words, but it was Mark's response that took me by surprise the most. He thanked Brenda for her apology, told her he loved her, but also emphasized the need to protect his family. He suggested that maybe in the future they could have some form of a relationship, but it would never be what it once was. We left the session feeling emotionally drained yet somewhat lighter. Fast forward a few months, and our son began asking questions about his grandma. After some contemplation, we decided to allow Brenda to send letters to him, and this has been the extent of their relationship. I still maintain some reservations, but I don't want my son to grow up without knowing his grandmother, especially if she has genuinely changed. Mark and I are also actively working with other couples and families who have faced similar issues. We want to help others learn from our experiences. Last but not least, Mark and I renewed our vows, considering it a new beginning for us, and we celebrated with a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. So, here we are, a journey filled with ups and downs. I've learned a great deal about myself, my family, and the kind of person I aspire to be. I'm genuinely delighted with the progress we've made as a family, and it's remarkable to witness the changes in Brenda. However, I remain cautious. Your unwavering support and encouragement have been a tremendous source of strength. Thank you. First and foremost, let me emphasize how much I love my husband, Mike, who is 29 years old. We've been together for 5 years, and while our families are quite different, with mine being very chill and supportive, Mike's family, particularly his mom, adheres to a more traditional mindset. Since Mike and I got engaged, my mother-in-law has been a constant source of stress for me. She criticizes everything from my clothing choices to my career as a graphic designer, and essentially everything about me. At first, I tried to take it in stride, assuming she was just being protective of her only son. Fast forward to the wedding planning phase. I had always envisioned a simple wedding, and Mike was on board with that idea. However, my mother-in-law had grand plans for a lavish ceremony and took over the planning, even selecting my wedding dress. I spoke to Mike about it, and he suggested we go with the flow because she had been dreaming of this day for a long time. Though I wasn't thrilled, I reluctantly agreed for the sake of peace. On our wedding day, my anxiety was soaring. My mother-in-law was taking charge and bossing everyone around, determined to make everything perfect for her dream day. During the preparations, she came over to me and made a hurtful comment, suggesting that Mike could have married someone more traditional. My heart sank, and it was the breaking point. I took a deep breath and, with calmness, addressed my mother-in-law. I expressed that I understood she might not have envisioned me as the traditional bride she expected for Mike, but I genuinely loved him, and he loved me. I emphasized that this was our day, and I wished for us to begin our new life together with positivity and support from our families. I assured her that I would be her family from that point forward, and wished she could see the value in embracing our differences instead of belittling them. At this point, my mother-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. She began sobbing and left the room, followed by a few family members. I was in shock as I hadn't anticipated that my words would lead to such a reaction. The room was filled with tension, and Mike came over, saying he was proud of me for standing up for myself, but wished things hadn't become so dramatic on our wedding day. We proceeded with the ceremony, but I couldn't help but feel the disapproving glares from some of Mike's family members. Mother-in-law kept her distance, and it was apparent that she had been crying. The mix of emotions left me feeling conflicted. After the wedding, my mother-in-law gave me the silent treatment, and the tension between our families remained palpable. Mike was supportive, but I could tell he was torn, as he missed having a normal relationship with his mom. Some family members from my side even reached out to him, suggesting that I had been too harsh. On the other hand, my family was entirely supportive, expressing their relief that someone had finally addressed the issue with mother-in-law. A month into our marriage, I received an unexpected call from my mother-in-law, sounding highly emotional. She expressed her desire to meet me alone, and although I was hesitant, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop. Upon my arrival, I found her already at the coffee shop, and I mentally prepared myself for what I believed would be a barrage of complaints. However, instead of confronting me with criticism, she broke down in tears. Amid her sobs, she began sharing her own experiences from her loveless marriage, emphasizing how she had felt deprived of the ability to make her own choices. She revealed that her excessive involvement in Mike's life stemmed from her desire to prevent him from making the same mistakes she had made. In a twisted way, her controlling nature was her expression of love. As I listened to her, my heart softened, and I realized I had never known this vulnerable side of her. In response, I spoke about how her words and actions had caused me pain, and I expressed my genuine desire to be accepted as a part of the family. I also stressed the importance of Mike and me making choices together as a couple, even if they sometimes differed from her vision. Tears welled up in both our eyes, and we came to a mutual understanding that we needed to work on our relationship, not only for Mike's sake, but also for the sake of family harmony. We agreed to engage in family therapy sessions involving Mike, her, and me. Fast forward to our first therapy session, it proved to be an eye-opening experience. Our therapist guided us in understanding the significance of communication and how we both carried emotional baggage that needed addressing. Mother-in-law began making genuine efforts to improve. She initiated weekly calls with me for casual conversations, and though it still felt somewhat awkward, it was a far cry from our previous interactions. I could sense her earnest attempt at change. Mike played an essential role throughout this process. He attended the therapy sessions with unwavering support and was thrilled to witness his mom and me working towards mending our relationship. Looking back, I wished the wedding date drama had never occurred, but in a way, it acted as a catalyst for change. If I hadn't spoken up, we might have continued the same toxic cycle. I maintain a cautious sense of optimism for the future. There's much work ahead, but I believe that we have taken the initial steps in the right direction. After participating in several family therapy sessions with my mother-in-law, it seemed that things were on the upswing. She appeared to be more understanding, and we began to cultivate a relationship that bore some resemblance to a typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law connection. However, about 2 months ago, Mike and I discovered that we were expecting our first child. We were ecstatic and couldn't wait to share the news with our families. Consequently, we organized a small dinner at our home to make the announcement. As the evening progressed and both of our families arrived, we enjoyed a pleasant dinner together. However, when we finally broke the news about the pregnancy, mother-in-law's reaction was far from what we had expected. Upon hearing the news, my mother-in-law immediately burst into tears, and her enthusiasm was palpable as she began talking about all the things she wanted to do for her grandchild. Initially, her intentions seemed sweet, but gradually, it morphed into her making plans without considering our feelings or opinions. I endeavored to maintain my composure and tactfully suggested that we should all discuss and make decisions together as a family. Regrettably, my mother-in-law did not take kindly to this approach and accused me of trying to keep her grandchild away from her. This time, Mike intervened and calmly told his mother that this was a joyful moment for us, and we should be celebrating together. He also emphasized that she needed to respect our boundaries as parents. This, however, only made my mother-in-law even more emotional, and she stormed out of the house. Consequently, the rest of the night was somewhat ruined, and it became apparent that we were back to square one. Despite the setbacks, we continued with our therapy sessions, and our therapist suggested that perhaps mother-in-law needed individual counseling to address her underlying issues. Mike and I were both supportive of this idea and encouraged her to consider it. The turning point came when, after a particularly emotional therapy session, my mother-in-law agreed to start individual counseling. She began attending these sessions, and we noticed a transformation in her demeanor. She became calmer and more receptive to our perspectives. During a joint session, she tearfully apologized for her behavior on the night of our pregnancy announcement and acknowledged that she still had a long way to go in comprehending and respecting boundaries. At present, we are cautiously navigating our relationship with my mother-in-law. There have been both ups and downs, but the fact that she's open to counseling and is showing signs of self-reflection is a promising development. In the meantime, Mike and I have been diligently working on establishing clear boundaries and communicating our expectations for involvement in our child's life. We understand the importance of our child having a relationship with her grandmother, but it has to be a healthy one. In addition, we are focusing on building and nurturing our little family. The pregnancy has brought us immense joy, and we are eagerly preparing for the arrival of our precious baby. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for your invaluable advice and kind words. It's been a roller coaster, but knowing that I have your support has made a significant difference. Following my last update, my mother-in-law continued with her therapy, and we began to notice gradual signs of improvement. She started communicating more openly, and we cautiously started involving her in planning for the baby. It felt as though a weight was gradually being lifted off our shoulders. Although we didn't entirely let our guards down, it was a relief not to constantly feel like we were walking on eggshells. Fast forward to the day of the delivery. Mike and I had a well-established birth plan, which we had communicated to both our families. According to our plan, only Mike was to be in the delivery room, and family members were to wait until we were ready for visitors. However, just as I was being wheeled into the delivery room, guess who unexpectedly appeared? My mother-in-law. She insisted that she should be in the room to witness the birth of her grandchild. The nurses, aware of our birth plan, prevented her from entering, and this resulted in a scene. Eventually, she had to be escorted out of the hospital. Following the birth of our beautiful baby girl, we were dismayed to learn about my mother-in-law's actions. However, we chose not to let it dampen our spirits and instead focus on our daughter and the joy she brought into our lives. When we returned home, my mother-in-law approached me to apologize. She appeared cheerful and genuinely regretful, but this time, something within me had changed. I had this precious little being to protect, and I couldn't continue allowing my mother-in-law's behavior to slide. I gazed at her calmly and stated, "I appreciate the apology, but you need to understand that our daughter's well-being is our priority. If you can't respect our boundaries, you will not be a part of her life." Silence filled the room, and it was evident that my words had hit home. We didn't see my mother-in-law for about a month. During this time, she continued her therapy and even joined a support group for grandparents, making a genuine effort to change. When she finally reached out, she was a transformed person. She thanked us for being firm with her and making her realize how her behavior had been affecting everyone around her. Now, several months have passed since that pivotal conversation. My mother-in-law has been amazing, respecting our boundaries, being supportive, and relishing in the time she spends with her granddaughter. We've made efforts to build bridges, recognizing the importance of family, and wanting our daughter to have a loving and supportive extended family. Reflecting on the journey, it's clear that it was a bumpy road to reach this point. There were moments when I questioned if the relationship with my mother-in-law was salvageable. However, through open communication, therapy, and setting clear boundaries, we've arrived at a place characterized by mutual respect and love. I'd like to conclude by expressing my gratitude to this community. Your advice, perspectives, and encouragement have been invaluable during this journey. We still have a long way to go, but I'm hopeful for the future. To anyone going through something similar, don't be afraid to set boundaries and seek professional help if necessary. Sometimes it takes a wake-up call for people to change. Congratulations on the birth of your daughter. It's incredible how the arrival of a child can put things into perspective. Your journey has been a roller coaster, and it's quite inspiring how both parties were able to grow through this. The key takeaways are the importance of setting boundaries and effective communication. It's not about who was right or wrong at a particular moment. It's about how everyone involved took steps to make things better for the sake of the new family member. This is a great lesson for many people who might be struggling